Thank you. I now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Comer from Kentucky, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Daszak, how long have you been a collaborator with the Wuhan Institute of Virology?
I think since about 2003.
So during that time before the pandemic, were you aware of all the types of research occurring at the Wuhan lab?
We were aware of all the published information coming out of the lab and the people we met from the lab.
Were you aware that there was a Chinese military lab associated with Wuhan lab?
No, and I still am not aware of that.
In the fall of 2019, the Wuhan lab virus database was taken offline. Have you ever seen its full virus database?
No.
To your knowledge, did the Wuhan Institute conduct coronavirus research that did not involve EcoHealth?
Yes.
In kind of standard procedure, do researchers publish every virus they find or every experiment they conduct?
And they try and publish most eventually.
So is it possible the Wuhan Institute has viruses or conducted experiments that they never published?
Yes.
So you testified to your lack of knowledge regarding activities at the Wuhan lab. Is it possible COVID-19 was the result of a lab leak?
I've publicly stated that many times, including as a member of the WHO mission to investigate the COVID origins. All of us in the group unanimously
so yes,
voted that
it's possible, correct?
that it was possible but extremely unlikely, based on the evidence we have.
Dr. Daszak, the U.S. intelligence community has been investigating the origins of COVID-19. During that investigation, were you ever contacted by any intelligence agencies?
Yes.
Which ones?
The CIA, the FBI, and the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Okay. Dr. Daszak, before I ask you this next question, I want to remind you that you are under oath. Other than the interactions that you just testified to, have you or do you have a standing relationship, either officially or unofficially, with any agency in the intelligence community?
No.
So you've never been an informant for the U.S. government?
You asked me if I have a standing relationship with any agencies in the intelligence community. The answer is no.
So you're stating publicly you've never been an informant for any U.S. intelligence agency?
I'm stating publicly that I do not have a standing relationship with the intelligence community. That was your question.
Have you ever been an informant for any U.S. intelligence agency?
Not to my knowledge. I've certainly, when they've asked me questions, I've provided answers, as any citizen of the U.S.
Like what types of questions? Did they ask you questions before the COVID outbreak?
I've spoken with FBI before the COVID outbreak, of course.
So you had communications with the intelligence community before the outbreak of COVID?
The FBI was a member of the Forum on Microbial Threats, which I'm the chair of, so yes. Only in that context.
Like what types of conversations did you talk about prior to the outbreak of COVID?
Talk about emerging disease threats and what information we have about where on the planet the next virus is likely to emerge.
Did the U.S.
certainly talked about China and the threats of coronaviruses.
So did the U.S. intelligence community know what was going on in the Wuhan lab?
That's a question for the U.S. Intelligence Agency. I mean, we've supplied any information to any government agency.
So the U.S. Intelligence Agency was interested, because you had conversations with them prior to COVID, in what type of activity was taking place in the Wuhan lab.
And I believe they've asked many other scientists too.
How familiar would you state that the intelligence community was with what was going on in the Wuhan lab? Did the intelligence community believe that the Wuhan lab was being used by China to manufacture bioweapons?
Well, that's really for the intelligence community to answer. But in the public statements that they've made, two agencies, I think, have low to moderate confidence that there was some activity. and the other agencies were unable to comment. So I'm not sure they do have much information.
Do you find it troubling that, by all accounts from your testimony, the intelligence community suspected something fishy was going on at the Wuhan lab? Despite that, they still funded research with American taxpayer dollars at the Wuhan lab?
Well, I don't know that the intelligence community funded research there, but
But the government did,
Yeah,
and the intelligence
yeah.
community is part of the government.
Sure. Sorry, I misunderstood your question. I don't find it troubling at all. I don't think it's unusual because the only two intelligence agencies, from my recollection, have any belief that that may have been involved in a lab origin of COVID, and they have low to moderate confidence. I just don't think the data are there to support that. And I think that the evidence that this came from a natural spillover is huge and growing every week.
My time's expired. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.